I pulled into my driveway that Tuesday afternoon, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The new bank card sat in my wallet, attached to an account my daughter Sarah knew nothing about. Every penny of my retirement savings, $198,000, was now safely beyond her reach. As I stepped out of my Chevy, I saw her standing on my front porch, arms crossed, face flushed red with fury. Before I could even close the car door, she was storming toward me. "Are you out of your mind? The ATM said your balance was gone," she screamed, waving her phone at me. I walked past her, unlocked my front door, and sat down in my recliner. I looked her straight in the eyes and said calmly, "I moved it. Every cent." Her face went pale as she realized what I had done. The silence that followed felt like it lasted hours, though it was probably only seconds. Sarah stood frozen in my living room, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I could see her mind racing, trying to understand what this meant, what I knew, what came next. But before we get to that moment, you need to understand how we got here. You need to know who Sarah was to me, and what our relationship had been before everything fell apart. Sarah is my only child. After her mother and I divorced when she was 12, I raised her mostly on my own. Her mother moved to California and slowly faded from our lives, sending birthday cards that became less frequent until they stopped altogether. It was just Sarah and me in this 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. I worked for the Postal Service for 37 years, starting as a carrier and eventually becoming a supervisor. Nothing glamorous, but it was honest work, with decent benefits and a solid pension. I watched Sarah grow from a hurt, confused little girl into a smart, capable woman. She went to Ohio State, got a degree in marketing, and built a career as a consultant for small businesses. I was so proud of her. When she married Brian 7 years ago, I thought she had found stability and happiness. Brian was a real estate agent, charming and confident, always talking about his next big deal. They had 2 beautiful children, Emma, who just turned 9, and Tyler, who is 7. 3 years after Emma was born, I met Margaret at a community center event. She was a widow, kind and funny, with a gentle way of seeing the world. We dated for a year before getting married. For 4 beautiful years, I had a partner again, someone to share my life with. Margaret adored Sarah and treated my grandchildren like they were her own. Then the cancer came, aggressive and merciless. 6 years ago, I buried my second wife and found myself alone again at 63. Sarah was there through all of it. She helped with Margaret's doctor appointments, brought meals when I was too grief-stricken to cook, let the kids stay with me on weekends to keep me company. Those were dark months, and having Sarah close felt like a lifeline. Maybe that's why I didn't think twice when she came to me 3 years ago with a request. We were sitting at my kitchen table on a Thursday evening. The kids were in the living room watching cartoons. Sarah looked stressed, tired in a way that worried me. She explained that Brian's income was unpredictable because he worked on commission. Some months were great, others were tight. She asked if I would add her to my checking account, just for emergencies. That way, if something urgent came up and they didn't have cash available, she could handle it without bothering me. I didn't hesitate. This was my daughter, my family. Of course I trusted her. The next day, we went to the bank together, and I added her as an authorized user on my account. She got her own debit card linked to my checking. The banker asked if I wanted to set limits or require dual signatures for large withdrawals. I waved it off. Sarah would never take advantage of me. She was responsible, careful. She just needed a safety net. For the first year, everything seemed fine. I would see occasional withdrawals, $200 here, $300 there. When I asked, Sarah always had reasonable explanations. The transmission needed work on their minivan. Emma needed braces. Tyler had an emergency room visit for a broken arm. I was happy to help. That's what family does. I lived modestly. My pension was $3,000 a month, more than enough for my needs. I had paid off the house years ago. My car was 14 years old but ran fine. I volunteered at the local food bank twice a week, played chess with retired friends at the community center, and babysat Emma and Tyler every Thursday afternoon. My retirement savings sat untouched in a linked savings account, growing slowly with modest interest. I never checked it. Why would I? It was just sitting there for the future, maybe for a rainy day, maybe to leave to Sarah and the grandkids eventually. About 4 months before that confrontation in my living room, I started noticing larger withdrawals. $800 one week, $1,200 the next, then $1,500. I called Sarah, trying to keep my tone casual. She sounded flustered but explained quickly. Brian's commissions had been delayed by escrow issues. They had unexpected medical bills. The roof needed emergency repairs. Every explanation sounded plausible. I felt a small twinge of concern but pushed it away. This was Sarah, my daughter. She would never lie to me. But then came the moment that started to crack my trust. It was a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks before I changed banks. I was at the grocery store, comparing prices on coffee, when I heard someone call my name. I turned to see Janet Miller, who lived 3 houses down from Sarah and Brian. We exchanged pleasantries, and then Janet said something that made my stomach drop. "I meant to tell you how generous you are, helping them get that new SUV. Sarah looks so happy driving it around. Must be nice to have a father who can do things like that." I smiled and nodded, but inside, my mind was reeling. What new SUV? Sarah drove a 7-year-old Honda minivan. I had not helped them buy any vehicle. I had not given them any large sum of money for any purpose. I finished my shopping in a daze and drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to rationalize what Janet had said. Maybe she was mistaken. Maybe she had seen someone else. Maybe Sarah had traded in the minivan, and I just had not noticed yet. But a voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that something was wrong. Very wrong. At 2 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep. I went to my small office, the second bedroom that I had turned into a workspace after Margaret died. I turned on my computer and logged into my bank account. I had online access but rarely used it. I preferred paper statements, the old-fashioned kind that came in the mail once a month. I usually just glanced at the balance and filed them away. The login screen asked for my password. It took me 3 tries to remember it. When the account summary finally loaded, I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. My checking account, which should have had around $5,000, showed a balance of $2,043. That was not right. My pension deposit had just gone through. Where had $3,000 gone in 2 weeks? I clicked on the transaction history. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely control the mouse. The screen filled with entries, line after line of withdrawals. $500 at an ATM. $700 at another ATM 3 days later. $900 as a debit purchase at a store I did not recognize. $1,000 cash withdrawal. Another $800. The dates went back weeks, months. I changed the date range to show the past 6 months. What I saw made me feel physically ill. Page after page of transactions. Withdrawals, purchases, transfers. My retirement savings account, which had held $240,000 6 months ago, now showed $42,000. $198,000. Gone. I printed everything. My printer was old and slow, and it took nearly 20 minutes to print all the statements. I sat there in the blue glow of the computer screen, watching page after page emerge, each one documenting my daughter's systematic theft of my life savings. When the printing finally finished, I spread the papers across my desk. I got a highlighter and started marking transactions that looked suspicious. A $1,200 purchase at a furniture store. $800 at a place called Luxe Boutique. Multiple $1,500 cash withdrawals at casinos in West Virginia, 3 hours away. A $5,000 payment to a Mercedes dealership. Dinners at expensive restaurants. $200 here, $300 there. A $4,000 charge labeled Travel Agency, Hawaii Package. I worked through the night, creating a spreadsheet on my computer. I listed every questionable transaction with the date, amount, and merchant. By the time the sun came up, I had documented $42,700 in withdrawals over 6 months that had nothing to do with emergencies or family needs. This was not helping with a broken transmission or medical bills. This was funding a lifestyle, paying for luxuries, treating my retirement savings like a personal expense account. I felt hollow, betrayed, foolish. How had I not noticed? How had I been so trusting, so blind? I had worked for 40 years, waking at 5 every morning, driving a postal route through Ohio winters, sorting mail in unair-conditioned warehouses during brutal summers, taking overtime whenever I could to build that nest egg. I had saved carefully, lived modestly, delayed gratification so I would have security in my old age, and my own daughter had stolen it. The word felt harsh even thinking it, but there was no other word. Theft, embezzlement, financial exploitation. She had not asked, she had not borrowed. She had simply taken, again and again, trusting that I would never check, never question, never stop her. I called the bank when they opened at 9. I spoke to a representative named Brenda, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained the situation. Brenda was sympathetic but firm. Since Sarah was an authorized user on the account, all the withdrawals were technically legal. She had every right to access the funds. The bank could not reverse the transactions or recover the money. My only option was to remove her as an authorized user, which would prevent future withdrawals but would not help with what was already gone. I thanked Brenda and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of printed statements. I felt old and tired and stupid. For 3 days, I barely left the house. I did not call Sarah. I did not confront her. I just sat with the knowledge of what she had done, trying to process the enormity of the betrayal. Friends called, wondering why I had missed chess club and my volunteer shift at the food bank. I made excuses. I was not ready to tell anyone yet. Shame kept me silent. How could I admit that my own daughter had been stealing from me for months while I remained oblivious? On the 4th day, my phone rang. It was Dennis, an old friend from the postal service who had retired 2 years before me. Dennis now worked part-time as a financial advisor, helping other retirees manage their money. His voice was cheerful, but there was an odd note in it. "Chaim, I need to tell you something, and I hope it does not come across wrong," he began. "I was at the Sterling House last night for a business dinner. You know that steakhouse downtown, the expensive one? I saw Sarah and Brian there. They were celebrating something, had champagne, the whole deal. Brian was pretty loud, talking about their vacation to Hawaii next month. I figured you must have given them some money as a gift or something. Just wanted to say that is really generous of you, but make sure you are taking care of yourself too, buddy." My blood turned to ice. The Sterling House. Steaks started at $60. Champagne. Hawaii vacation. Celebrating with my money while lying to my face about struggling to pay bills. While I ate canned soup and turned down my thermostat to save $15 a month on heating. "Thanks for letting me know, Dennis," I managed to say. "I appreciate it." After I hung up, something shifted inside me. The shame and hurt hardened into something else. Resolve. I was not going to be a victim. I was not going to let this continue. Sarah had made her choices. Now, I would make mine. I spent the next week planning my response with the same careful attention I had once given to organizing mail routes and managing postal employees. If Sarah could be strategic in her deception, I could be strategic in my protection. Step 1 was securing my remaining money. I drove to a bank across town, a different institution from the one I had used for 30 years. I wanted no connection between the old account and the new one. No chance Sarah could talk her way into accessing information. I met with a banker named Ruth, a professional woman in her 40s who listened to my situation without judgment. "You are not the first person to come in with this problem," she said kindly. "And you are doing the right thing by protecting yourself." I opened both a new checking account and a savings account. Ruth helped me set up extra security measures, a unique password that was not my birthday or any family name, security questions with answers that only I would know, and a note on the account that no information should be given over the phone under any circumstances. Every inquiry had to be in person, with photo identification. The transfer took 2 days to process. $198,243 moved from my old account to the new one. When the transaction completed, I went back to the original bank and closed the old accounts entirely. The balance showed 0. Let Sarah try to withdraw from that. Step 2 was documentation. I had already printed the bank statements, but now I organized them into a binder with tabs for each month. I created a detailed spreadsheet showing the total amount taken, broken down by category: cash withdrawals, luxury purchases, travel, restaurants, and miscellaneous. I made 3 copies of everything. 1 set went into a fireproof safe in my closet. 1 set went into a safety deposit box at the new bank. 1 set I kept in my office for reference. Step 3 was the hardest: changing my will. I had created a simple will 5 years ago, after Margaret died. Everything went to Sarah. The house, the savings, my few possessions of value. It seemed obvious at the time. She was my only child, my heir. I met with a lawyer, a woman named Patricia, who specialized in estate planning. I explained the situation, showed her the documentation. She nodded grimly. "I see this more often than you would think," Patricia said. "Adult children who view their parents' assets as their future inheritance and decide to collect early." Together, we drafted a new will. The house and all remaining assets would go into a trust for Emma and Tyler, my grandchildren. They would gain access when they turned 25, old enough to manage money responsibly. Until then, the trust would be managed by my nephew Carl, my brother's son, a steady accountant who lived 2 hours away. Sarah would receive only personal items: photos, family heirlooms, Margaret's jewelry. Nothing of significant financial value. I also added a clause explaining why. If Sarah ever contested the will, the documentation of her theft would become part of the public record. It was not about revenge. It was about protecting my grandchildren from having their inheritance stolen the way mine had been. Step 4 was consulting about legal options. Patricia referred me to a colleague who handled elder law. This attorney, a serious man named George, reviewed my documentation and confirmed what the bank had told me. Since Sarah was an authorized user, no criminal charges could be filed. However, I could potentially pursue a civil case for financial exploitation of an elderly person. The challenge is that you would have to prove she coerced you or misled you into giving her access, George explained. And even if you won, litigation would cost tens of thousands of dollars and take years. The emotional toll would be significant. You might never recover the full amount. I thanked him for his honesty and decided to keep the legal option in reserve, a last resort if other measures failed. For 2 weeks, I moved through my daily life with a strange sense of calm purpose. I went to chess club, volunteered at the food bank, had coffee with friends. No one knew what I was planning. I felt like I was holding a secret, preparing for a confrontation that would change everything. I checked my old bank account online one final time on a Monday evening, the day before I planned to inform Sarah about the changes. What I saw made my heart race. Sarah had attempted a withdrawal that afternoon. $3,000. The transaction showed as declined due to insufficient funds. She knew. She had tried to take more money and discovered the account was empty. That is why, when I pulled into my driveway the next afternoon after finalizing the last details at the new bank, Sarah was already there, waiting on my porch, fury radiating from every inch of her posture. She had not come to visit her father. She had come because her cash supply had been cut off, and she wanted answers. Sarah's voice was shrill, almost hysterical. "Dad, where is the money? What have you done? Did someone scam you? Did you fall for one of those phone scams? We need to call the police right now." Her concern would have been touching if it were genuine, but I had seen the bank statements. I knew the truth. This was not worry for my welfare. This was panic about losing access to funds she had been draining for months. I walked past her into my house, set my keys on the table by the door, and sat down in my worn recliner. The same chair I had sat in for 20 years, the one Margaret used to tease me about because the armrest was torn and the upholstery was faded. I had never replaced it because it was comfortable and familiar, and spending $400 on a new chair seemed wasteful when this one worked fine. Sarah followed me inside, still talking rapidly. The ATM said insufficient funds. I thought maybe the bank made a mistake, but then I called them, and they said the account was closed. Closed? Why would you close your account without telling me? I am on that account to help you, to make sure you are okay. This is crazy. You are not thinking clearly. Behind her, I heard another voice. Brian had arrived. Of course he had. Sarah must have called him the moment she discovered the money was gone. He walked in without knocking, his expensive leather shoes clicking on my hardwood floor. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, his hair styled with some kind of product that made it shine. Chaim, what is going on? Brian's tone was less frantic than Sarah's, but had an edge of aggression that I did not appreciate. Sarah is upset. We need to know what happened to your accounts. We are family. We have a right to know. A right to know. The words hung in the air. I looked at both of them standing in my living room, demanding answers, claiming entitlement to information about my finances. When had this happened? When had my money become their business, their concern, their right? Why do you need to know? I asked quietly. The question seemed to stump them. Sarah blinked. Because we care about you. Because we want to make sure you are safe, that no one is taking advantage of you. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Taking advantage of me, I repeated. You are worried someone is taking advantage of me. I stood up and walked to my office. I could hear them whispering urgently behind me. When I returned, I was carrying the binder. The one with all the printed statements, all the highlighted transactions, all the evidence of their betrayal. I sat back down and opened the binder on my lap. Let's talk about being taken advantage of, I said. I began laying pages on the coffee table, one by one. 6 months of statements. I did not say anything at first, just let the papers speak for themselves. Each page covered with highlighted entries, hundreds of transactions, thousands of dollars. Sarah's face went from flushed to pale. Brian's jaw tightened. The room was completely silent, except for the rustle of paper. When I had laid out about 20 pages, I looked up. $42,700, I said. In 6 months. That is what you took from my retirement savings. Money I spent 40 years earning. Money I thought was secure for my future. Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at the papers, then at me, then back at the papers. Brian recovered faster. Now hold on, he said, his voice taking on a smooth, reasonable quality. You are making this sound bad, but these were all things we discussed. You told us to use the card whenever we needed it. You wanted to help us. Show me, I said. Show me where I told you to spend $1,200 on furniture from an expensive boutique store. Show me where I said you could withdraw $1,500 at a casino in West Virginia. Show me where I approved a $5,000 payment to buy a Mercedes. Brian's face reddened. You are twisting this. You gave Sarah access to the account. That means you trusted her to use it appropriately. For emergencies, I said. She told me it was for emergencies. Car repairs, medical bills, things you needed. Sarah found her voice. It came out small and shaky. We did need those things, Dad. We have been struggling. Brian's business has been difficult. The market is tough, and we have had so many expenses. I pulled out another sheet of paper. This one was not a bank statement. It was a printout from a real estate website showing Brian's recent sales. I did some research, I said. Brian closed 3 commercial properties in the past 4 months. The commissions on those deals totaled over $90,000. That does not sound like struggling to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah turned to look at Brian, confusion crossing her face. You told me the deals fell through, she said quietly. You said we were barely making it. Brian's mask cracked. His smooth demeanor evaporated, replaced with something ugly. Oh, come on. We needed the money for the house, for the kids' school, for things we deserve. Your dad was sitting on nearly $250,000 doing nothing with it, just letting it sit there. It was not doing nothing, I said, my voice harder than I intended. It was keeping me secure. It was my safety net. It was supposed to last me through retirement, through whatever medical issues come with getting older, through emergencies I cannot even predict yet. Brian took a step closer, and I saw something in his face that chilled me. Contempt. You were going to leave it all to Sarah anyway when you died. We just needed it now instead of later. What is the difference? We are family. This is what family does. The casual cruelty of it. The assumption that my death was just an inconvenient delay in accessing money that already belonged to them hit me like a physical blow. This was not about need. This was not about emergencies. This was entitlement. They saw my savings as their inheritance, and they had decided to collect early. I stood up slowly. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steady. Get out of my house. Sarah reached for me. Dad, please. We can talk about this. We can figure this out. I stepped back from her outstretched hand. I said, get out. Brian grabbed Sarah's arm. Come on. He is being unreasonable. Let him cool off. They left, but not before Sarah turned at the door, tears streaming down her face. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. I did not respond. I just closed the door behind them and turned the lock. The house felt too quiet after they left. I stood in my living room, surrounded by the scattered bank statements, and felt the full weight of what had just happened. My daughter had stolen from me. My son-in-law had justified it with cold calculation. And I was alone. I gathered up all the papers, carefully returning them to the binder. My hands were shaking. I sat back down in my recliner and let myself feel everything I had been holding back for weeks. The hurt, the betrayal, the grief for the relationship I thought I had with Sarah. I must have sat there for an hour, maybe more. The light outside faded. I did not turn on any lamps. I just sat in the growing darkness, trying to process the enormity of what had been broken. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face. When she realized, I knew. I heard Brian's words. You were going to leave it all to her anyway when you died. We just needed it now, instead of later. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7. Sarah. I did not answer. She called 6 more times that day. Each time, I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the messages later. The first few were apologies, frantic and tearful. She was sorry. She did not know how it had gotten so bad. Brian had pressured her. She would pay me back. Please, just talk to her. By the evening, the tone changed. The later messages were angry. I was being selfish. I did not understand how hard things were for them. I was choosing money over family. How could I do this to her, to my grandchildren? The mention of Emma and Tyler cut deep. I had not seen them in 2 weeks. Thursday afternoons, my regular time with them, had been disrupted by all of this. I missed them terribly. Sarah showed up at my house twice that week. I saw her car pull into the driveway and did not answer the door. I stood in my kitchen, watching through the window as she knocked, waited, knocked again. The second time, she sat on my porch for 20 minutes before finally leaving. Her text messages became increasingly desperate, then accusatory. She was going to cut off my access to the grandchildren, she said. If I was going to abandon her, then I could not be part of their lives. She called me cruel, heartless, obsessed with money. That threat broke something in me. Emma and Tyler were innocent in all this. They were children who loved their grandfather and had done nothing wrong. Using them as weapons was unforgivable. I called Patricia, my lawyer. I need to know my options regarding my grandchildren, I said. She listened to everything that had happened since our last meeting. In Ohio, grandparents do have some rights to visitation, but it requires going to court and proving that denying access would harm the children. It gets complicated when the parent is alienating the child from the grandparent as a punishment. However, there might be another issue here. Financial exploitation, combined with threatening behavior, could be grounds for more serious intervention. I was not sure I wanted to take Sarah to court, but I needed to understand what was possible. Patricia suggested a consultation with her colleague George again, the elder law attorney. We set up a meeting for the following Monday. That weekend was the longest of my life. I went through the motions of my routine: grocery shopping, a walk around the neighborhood, sorting through old photos of Sarah as a child, happy photos, birthday parties, school plays, graduation. Where had that little girl gone? When had she become someone who could steal from her father and feel justified? Monday came, and I met with George. I brought all my documentation, plus copies of Sarah's threatening text messages. George reviewed everything carefully. I need to ask you some questions about Sarah's financial situation and Brian's business, he said. It is relevant to understanding the full picture. I told him what I knew, including my suspicion that they were not actually struggling. George made some calls. He had connections in the real estate industry, people who could verify sales records. 2 hours later, he had information that made my blood boil. Brian had not just closed 3 deals in 4 months, he had closed 5, totaling over $130,000 in commissions. He was not struggling, he was thriving, and he had apparently told Sarah the deals fell through, so she would keep taking money from me without guilt. Your daughter may be a victim here too, George said carefully. If Brian was lying to her about their finances, manipulating her into taking money from you under false pretenses, she may not have understood the full scope of what was happening. It was a generous interpretation, but it did not excuse Sarah's actions. She had still taken the money, she had still lied, but it added a layer of complexity I had not considered. George outlined my options. I could file for a restraining order to stop Sarah from harassing me. I could pursue civil charges for financial exploitation. I could file for grandparent visitation rights if she followed through on cutting me off from Emma and Tyler, or I could try to resolve this outside the courts, through mediation and negotiation. What do you want, Chime? George asked. Not what is legally possible, but what do you actually want? I thought about that question for a long time. What did I want? I wanted my money back, but I knew that was unlikely. I wanted Sarah to acknowledge what she had done and feel genuine remorse. I wanted my relationship with my grandchildren protected. And somewhere, buried under the hurt and anger, I wanted to believe there was a chance to rebuild something with Sarah, though I had no idea what that would look like. I want boundaries, I said finally. I want her to face consequences. I want to protect myself, but I do not want to destroy her completely, and I do not want Emma and Tyler to suffer. George nodded. Then, we start with clear boundaries and see how she responds. We drafted a restraining order, not because I feared violence, but because I needed Sarah to understand that showing up unannounced and sending threatening messages was not acceptable. The order would require her to stay away from my home unless I explicitly invited her. All communication would need to go through my attorney. The court granted a temporary restraining order. A sheriff deputy served Sarah the papers at her home on a Wednesday afternoon. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Sarah, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Dad, please, please, do not do this. I will do anything. I will stop. I will leave you alone. Just do not shut me out completely. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I listened to her cry, and my heart ached. But I also felt a strange sense of peace. I was not being cruel. I was protecting myself. Sarah, I said quietly, when you are ready to genuinely acknowledge what you did, When you are ready to talk about real accountability and not just sorry you got caught, I will consider meeting with you. But it has to go through my lawyer. And you have to understand that things will never go back to the way they were." "I understand," she whispered. "I do. I do not want to lose you." "Then prove it," I said. "Show me through actions, not words." I hung up before I could change my mind. After I hung up with Sarah, I sat at my kitchen table and cried. Real, deep sobs that came from a place I had been holding closed for weeks. I cried for the daughter I thought I knew, for the trust that had been shattered, for the future I had imagined that would never exist now. But I also cried with a strange sense of relief. I had stood up for myself. I had set boundaries. I had stopped being a victim and started being someone who demanded respect, even from his own child. I knew I could not go through this alone anymore. The shame that had kept me silent was poisonous. I needed support, people who could help me navigate what came next. I started with my siblings. I have a brother, Raymond, who lives in Cleveland, and a sister, Linda, in Cincinnati. We are not super close, but we talk every few weeks and see each other on holidays. I called them both and asked if they could come visit that weekend. Something in my tone must have worried them, because they both agreed immediately. Saturday morning, Raymond and Linda arrived within an hour of each other. We sat in my living room, and I told them everything. I showed them the bank statements, the documentation, the text messages. Linda cried. Raymond's face went dark with anger. "I'm going to call her right now," Raymond said, reaching for his phone. "She needs to hear what we think about this." I stopped him. "No, that is not what I need. I need you to understand what happened and support me. I do not need you to fight my battles." Linda leaned over and hugged me. "You should have told us sooner. You should not have gone through this alone." I felt stupid, I admitted. Like I should have seen it coming. Like a foolish old man who got taken advantage of by his own kid. Raymond shook his head firmly. "You trusted your daughter. That is not stupid. That is normal. What she did, that is the problem. Not you." Their support meant more than I could express. We spent the afternoon talking through everything. Raymond, who worked in finance, helped me review my budget to make sure my remaining savings would last comfortably through retirement. We calculated that if I was careful, the $198,000 could generate enough modest interest, combined with my pension, to sustain me well into my 90s. Linda asked about my emotional state, whether I had considered talking to someone professional. I had not thought about therapy, but she made a good point. This was trauma, betrayal by someone I loved deeply. Processing it alone might not be enough. Before they left, we made a plan. Raymond would help me set up better financial protections and monitoring. Linda would research therapists who specialized in family conflict and elder abuse. And both of them made me promise to call them anytime, day or night, if I needed support. The next week, I did something even harder. I told my closest friends, Dennis, who had first alerted me to Sarah's spending, Frank, a retired accountant I played chess with twice a week, and Dolores, Margaret's sister, who had stayed close to me even after Margaret died. We met for coffee at a diner we frequented. I brought copies of some of the documentation, not because I needed to prove anything, but because I needed them to understand the scope of what had happened. Their reactions were immediate and fierce. Dennis was furious, saying he should have pushed harder when he first saw Sarah at that expensive restaurant. Frank immediately offered to help me create a financial monitoring system, so I would never be vulnerable again. Dolores just held my hand and told me Margaret would be proud of how I was handling this. Frank's offer turned out to be incredibly valuable. As a former accountant, he helped me set up a system where I reviewed my accounts weekly, flagged any unusual activity, and maintained detailed records. He also helped me understand investment options that would protect my principal while generating modest returns. Dennis connected me with a financial advisor who specialized in protecting elderly clients from exploitation. This advisor, a woman named Grace, had seen cases like mine many times. She helped me set up additional safeguards, alerts for any transaction over a certain amount, required phone confirmations for large transfers, and regular check-ins to review my accounts. "You are doing everything right," Grace told me. "You protected yourself, you set boundaries, and you are building a support system. A lot of people in your situation just withdraw and become isolated. That makes them even more vulnerable." I also started attending a support group for seniors who had experienced financial abuse. It met every other Tuesday at the community center. Walking into that first meeting was hard. Admitting to a room full of strangers that my own daughter had stolen from me felt humiliating. But what I found was not judgment. It was understanding. There were 12 people in that group, ranging in age from 60 to 85. Every single one had a story of being exploited by someone they trusted. Children, grandchildren, caregivers, even spouses. Hearing their stories made me feel less alone and less foolish. One woman, Helen, was 73 and had lost nearly all her savings to her son's gambling addiction. Another man, Robert, was 80 and had been systematically drained by a daughter-in-law who convinced him she was investing his money. Their stories were heartbreaking, but they were also inspiring. They had survived. They had rebuilt their lives and their sense of self-worth. I started sharing my own story in that group, and something shifted. Talking about it openly, without shame, helped me process the betrayal. I was not hiding anymore. I was facing what happened and choosing to move forward. 2 weeks after the restraining order was served, something unexpected happened. I was working in my garden on a Thursday afternoon, the time I usually spent with Emma and Tyler, when I heard a small voice call my name. "Grandpa?" I turned to see Emma standing at the edge of my driveway. She was alone, her pink backpack slung over one shoulder, her bike lying in the grass. Her face was streaked with tears. My heart nearly stopped. "Emma? Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Does your mom know where you are?" She shook her head and started crying harder. "I rode my bike here after school. I had to see you. Mom keeps crying all the time, and Dad keeps yelling, and I heard them fighting about you. Mom said you do not love us anymore, and Dad said terrible things about you, and I needed to know if it is true. Did we do something wrong, Grandpa? Why do you not love us anymore?" I dropped my gardening trowel and went to her. I knelt down, ignoring the protest from my knees, and pulled her into a hug. She was shaking, this little 9-year-old girl who had somehow become collateral damage in an adult conflict she did not understand. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," I said, holding her face in my hands, so she had to look at me. "I love you and Tyler more than almost anything in this world. You did nothing wrong. Nothing. This is a problem between grown-ups, between your mom and me, but it has nothing to do with you. Do you understand? Then, why can we not see you anymore?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because your mom and I need to work some things out first. But that does not mean I stopped loving you. That could never happen." I dried her tears and brought her inside. I gave her some cookies and milk, the same snack I always made for her on our Thursday afternoons. While she ate, I called Sarah. I had to. Emma was 9 years old and had ridden her bike several miles without permission. Sarah needed to know she was safe. Sarah answered on the first ring. "Emma? Is Emma with you?" She did not come home from school. I have been calling her friends. I was about to call the police. "She is here," I said calmly. "She is safe." She rode her bike to my house. The relief in Sarah's voice was palpable. "Oh, thank God. I will be right there." "Sarah," I said, "we need to talk. Really talk. For their sake." There was a long pause. "I know," she whispered. "I know we do." When Sarah arrived 15 minutes later, she looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes wrinkled. She rushed to Emma and hugged her fiercely, then turned to me. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not have used the kids as a weapon. That was wrong. They should not be in the middle of this." I nodded. "No, they should not. And if we are going to fix anything, we need to start there. Whatever happens between us, Emma and Tyler do not deserve to lose their grandfather." Sarah's face crumpled. "You are right. You are absolutely right. Can we talk? Please? I will do it through your lawyer if you want, but I need to talk to you." I looked at Emma, who was watching us with worried eyes. "Not today," I said. "But soon. I will call my lawyer and set something up. A real conversation where we can be honest about everything." Sarah nodded, taking Emma's hand. "Thank you. For taking care of her. For being here when she needed you." After they left, I sat in my quiet house and felt something I had not felt in weeks. Hope. Not blind hope that everything would magically be okay, but a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. The conversation did not happen immediately. I insisted it go through proper channels with my lawyer present. Sarah agreed without argument. We scheduled a meeting for 2 weeks later, enough time for both of us to prepare emotionally. Patricia arranged for us to meet in a neutral conference room at her office. Sarah could bring her own lawyer if she wanted, but she chose to come alone. Brian was explicitly not invited. Sarah agreed to that condition without hesitation, which told me something important about the state of her marriage. When the day came, I arrived early. Patricia had prepared me, coaching me on staying calm, focusing on facts, and being clear about what I needed. Sarah arrived exactly on time, looking nervous and small, in a way I had not seen since she was a child. We sat across from each other at a polished conference table. Patricia sat beside me, a legal pad in front of her. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Sarah began. I need to say something before we start the official part of this meeting. Dad, I am sorry. I am so deeply sorry for what I did to you. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I told myself so many lies. I told myself we needed the money, that you would not mind, that it was practically mine anyway. Brian kept saying, you would leave it all to me eventually, so what did it matter if we used some now? And I believed him, because it was easier than admitting I was stealing from my own father. Tears were streaming down her face, but she did not look away from me. I was wrong. It was not need, it was greed. I wanted things. I wanted to keep up with our neighbors, to drive a nice car, to take vacations, to have the life I thought I deserved, and I justified it by using you. I used your trust, your love, your generosity against you. That is unforgivable, and I know that. I do not expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I finally see what I did. I listened, watching her carefully. This was different from the panicked apologies of before. This felt genuine, raw, like she had spent the past weeks really looking at herself, and not liking what she saw. What changed? I asked quietly. 2 weeks ago, you were threatening to keep the kids from me. Now you are here admitting everything. What happened? Sarah took a shaky breath. Emma came home from your house and told me what she asked you. If you still loved her, if she did something wrong, and I realized what I was doing to my own children. I was making them feel the same fear and confusion I put them through when I was stealing from you. I was teaching them that love is conditional, that family hurts each other. I could not do it anymore. She pulled out a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. I also found out the truth about Brian's business. I hired an accountant to look at our finances because nothing was adding up. He has been hiding money from me for over a year. All those times he said deals fell through, they had actually closed. He was depositing commissions into a separate account I did not know about, while telling me we were broke, so I would keep taking from you. I opened the folder. Inside were financial statements showing multiple accounts in Brian's name only, totaling over $200,000. He lied to both of us, Sarah continued, and I am divorcing him. I already filed the papers. My lawyer says I have a strong case because he was hiding marital assets, but none of that excuses what I did. Even if Brian lied to me, I still made the choice to take your money. I still spent it. I still betrayed you. Patricia spoke for the first time. Sarah, my client needs more than apologies. He needs to know that you understand the impact of your actions and that you are willing to make meaningful amends. Sarah nodded. I know. I have been working with a financial counselor, and I created a repayment plan. She pulled out another document. I can pay you $200 a month. It is not much, but it is what I can afford after supporting myself and the kids. With 10% interest, it will take about 17 years to pay back the full amount. I know that is a long time, and I know it does not fix what I broke, but I want to try. I looked at the repayment agreement. $200 a month. For 17 years, she would be 52 when it was paid off. The amount was small compared to what she had taken, but it represented something important: accountability. I want this in writing, I said. Legally binding. If you miss payments, there need to be consequences. I understand, Sarah said. Whatever you want, I will sign anything. We spent the next hour negotiating terms. Patricia drafted an agreement that included the repayment plan, penalties for missed payments, and provisions for my access to the grandchildren. I would have visitation every Sunday afternoon at my house. Sarah would bring Emma and Tyler and could stay or leave, her choice. But the visits would be consistent and protected. I also insisted on 2 other conditions. Sarah had to continue therapy to address why she had allowed herself to justify the theft, and she had to attend financial counseling to learn better money management. Sarah agreed to everything without argument. There is one more thing, I said. I changed my will. Your inheritance now goes into a trust for Emma and Tyler. They will get it when they turn 25. I expected anger or hurt, but Sarah just nodded. That is fair. More than fair, honestly. They should not have to worry about me taking from them the way I took from you. We signed the agreements. Legally binding documents that turned our broken relationship into terms and conditions. It felt cold and sad, but also necessary. As we were gathering papers to leave, Sarah looked at me with red, swollen eyes. Do you think you will ever be able to forgive me? I thought about that question. Forgiveness felt too big, too distant. But hatred felt equally wrong. I do not know, I answered honestly. But I'm willing to see if we can build something new. Not what we had before, because that was built on assumptions that were not true. But maybe something different. Something based on honesty and boundaries. I would like that, Sarah whispered. Over the following months, something slow and painful and ultimately beautiful began to happen. Sarah followed through on every single promise. She made her payments on time, every month, without fail. She attended therapy every week and financial counseling every 2 weeks. She brought Emma and Tyler to my house every Sunday. At first, the visits were awkward. Sarah would drop the kids off and leave, unable to face the discomfort of staying. But gradually, she started staying for a few minutes. Then half an hour. Then through dinner. We did not talk about the money or the betrayal during those visits. We focused on the kids, on rebuilding normalcy. I taught Emma how to plant tomatoes in my garden. Tyler and I built model cars. Sarah watched, participated, slowly relaxed. Her divorce from Brian was ugly. He fought her on everything, trying to hide assets and avoid paying child support. But Sarah stood firm. She got a better job to support herself, working longer hours but refusing to ask me for help. She wanted to prove she could manage on her own. 6 months into the repayment plan, Sarah brought Emma and Tyler for their Sunday visit and handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. "It is from my tax refund," she explained. "I know it is not close to what I owe, but I wanted to make a larger payment to show you I am serious." I stared at the check. $5,000. Not because she had to, not because it was in the agreement, but because she wanted to. "Thank you," I said quietly. That night, after Sarah and the kids left, I thought about the journey we had been on. The betrayal still hurt. I still had moments of anger and grief for what was lost. But I also saw genuine change in my daughter. She was working, struggling, learning. She was facing her mistakes instead of running from them. I also found unexpected healing in the support group. Sharing my story helped others, and hearing their stories helped me. I became an advocate for stronger financial protection laws for elderly people. I spoke at community events about warning signs of exploitation. I turned my pain into purpose. A year after that confrontation in my living room, I sat on my porch watching the sunset. Emma and Tyler were inside making cookies with Sarah. I could hear them laughing, arguing about whether chocolate chips or raisins were better. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Thank you for not giving up on me completely. I know I do not deserve it, but I am grateful every day." I typed back. Rebuilding is harder than starting over. But maybe that is the point. I learned something profound through all of this. Love and boundaries are not opposites. You can love someone and still protect yourself from them. You can hold people accountable and still hope for their redemption. Forgiveness is not forgetting or excusing. It is choosing not to let the betrayal define your entire future. Sarah stole from me. That fact will never change. But she also faced what she did, accepted consequences, and worked to become better. That does not erase the theft, but it gives us a foundation to build something new. I also learned that asking for help is not weakness. Telling my siblings, my friends, joining that support group, working with lawyers and counselors, all of it was strength. Isolation makes you vulnerable. Community makes you resilient. My retirement savings are smaller than I planned. That is a reality I live with. But I am financially secure, emotionally supported, and surrounded by people who care about me. I have my grandchildren in my life. I have a daughter who is genuinely trying to change. I have friends who showed up when I needed them. Most importantly, I have my dignity. I stood up for myself. I set boundaries. I refused to be a victim. That might be worth more than any amount of money. Trust, I learned, is built in drops and lost in buckets. Rebuilding it takes time, consistency, humility, and patience. My relationship with Sarah will never be what it was, but maybe it can be something better. Something built on truth instead of assumptions. Something where we both understand that love requires respect, honesty requires courage, and family requires more than blood. It requires commitment to treating each other with dignity. Today, Sarah is 3 years into her repayment plan. She has not missed a single payment. Emma is 12, Tyler is 10, and they spend every Sunday with me. Sarah and I have dinner together once a month. Awkward sometimes, but increasingly comfortable. We talk about real things now. Our relationship is smaller but more honest. I volunteer with an organization that helps seniors protect themselves from financial exploitation. I share my story because I know how much shame keeps people silent, and silence keeps them vulnerable. Brian is out of their lives entirely. He remarried someone wealthy and moved to Florida. Sarah says she feels lighter without him. My life is quieter now, simpler, but richer in the ways that matter. I have learned that protecting yourself is an act of self-love, that boundaries are gifts you give yourself, and that redemption is possible, but only through genuine work and accountability. The money is not coming back, not all of it. But I got something more valuable. I got my self-respect back. I got honest relationships back. I got a future built on reality instead of illusions. And that, I have learned, is enough. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to set boundaries with someone you love? How did you balance protecting yourself with leaving room for reconciliation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might help someone else facing a similar situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. It helps others find these stories and realize they are not alone. Subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about navigating family challenges, betrayal, and finding strength. And share this with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes knowing others have walked this path makes the journey feel less lonely. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gave you something to think about, maybe even something that helps you in your own life. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect, even by the people you love most. Setting boundaries is not cruelty, it is survival. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is protect yourself while still leaving the door open for healing.